Hey, I got a question. Are you in a situationship? Do you find yourself in an entanglement of sorts? Are you a booty call of sorts? Or I think we call it something else if it's the men. But either way, you get what it is that I'm talking about. Today, what I want to talk about is not so much about boundaries, because it's all the rave that you need to set some hard boundaries. And I don't think it's that you need to set some hard boundaries. I think it's that you need to get yourself some standards. So in today's episode, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about how this relates to codependency, because it is directly correlated to it. I want to remind you what codependency is. Codependency is really just a set of dysfunctional habits that we have developed in order to stay safe in our life and in our relationship, to feel secure in our life and relationships, and to feel loved in our life and relationships. It does not mean that we are broken at all or that we need to fix ourselves. It means that the habits that we've had have worked for us for a period of time, and now we're leveling up to the 2.0 version of ourselves because we're tired of having the same type of repetitive relationships that end in the same way. And so in order to do that, you can't take 1.0 version of you into 2.0 version, okay? So what codependency is not, it's not something that escapes men. Men experience this the same way that women do. I am finding more often than not, people don't really truly understand or know how to be in relationship with one another. And codependency is all about being in, well, the antithesis of codependency is being in healthy relationships. We've learned very dysfunctional ways of being in relationships. I'll just ask the question, how many of you had parents who sat you down and actually talked to you about how to be in a healthy, loving relationship where there's communication? How many of you saw that modeled in your family? I didn't. I did not. And so we only can give what we got. And so what happens here is we get into a relationship most of the time because we're looking for things like chemistry, or we're looking for things like the Disney fantasy of having a prince come and sweep us off of our feet. We might look at the person aesthetically to see whether or not they're cute and whether or not they make cute babies, right? Or we look at a woman and see if she will look great on our arm. Does she enhance our image and appearance? But what we don't go beyond, or, oh wait, before I go any further, we might be looking at their bank account, the car that they drive, the house that they live in, the circles that they travel in. Are they in various circles? Well, all of those things are nice and everything, but they do not sustain a relationship, and they surely will not long-term make you happy. In order for you to have the type of relationship that you want, you have to have a set of personal standards. Personal standards are distinctly different from boundaries. Now, maybe you need to start off with boundaries, but let me tell you a little bit about what boundaries are. Boundaries, by definition, bind you in. That's what a boundary is. It's going to bind you in. It basically means that you feel like you need to be in a defense mode, trying to protect yourself from whatever is vicious or harmful out here. It basically is saying to yourself that you feel disempowered and that you don't know how to take care of yourself. And I'm here to tell you that you do. And if you don't, I can teach you how to learn how to take care of yourself. And it's by establishing some core standards. Standards basically mean that you take a stand for yourself. Standards are for you. They're not for the other person. They are how you guide your life based on your core values. So when we are going to get into relationships, while we may initially be chemically attracted to someone, what we really need to do is to have a conversation with the person, not for a month, not for 2 months, not even for 3 months, but over time to get to know the person's character. We need to determine whether or not their values and our values match up. And we, moreover, set a set of standards for ourselves in terms of how we're going to engage in relationships. It means that And this is not just in sexually intimate relationships, it's in friendships as well. It means that we set a standard for ourselves that maybe people who are in our inner circle, these are people that we can count on, that we can trust, that they show up for us like maybe 80% of the time. That's the standard that I set, that I can count on them to show up for me like 80% of the time. Now, if it's a person that I can only count on them to show up 50% of the time, they're in my outer circle. And that's not because they're a bad person, it's because we don't align. But what happens is, from a codependency perspective, we just think that we need to keep everyone close to us to help us to feel secure and safe. Okay? So even if it's a parent, if it's a sibling, if it's an auntie, we want to keep people close because we feel like, oh, well, we're DNA related, and so we should automatically be able to trust them, not recognizing that these are the very same people that could breach your so-called boundaries on any given day, that you can't count on some of the people. They don't communicate effectively with you. They don't allow themselves to be vulnerable in the relationship. So the relationship is not a give and a take. It is one where you feel like you're maybe giving out more than what you actually give. And that also applies for our sexually intimate relationships. So we want to talk about what are the consequences that come with having poor standards. And what are the consequences for setting boundaries? Let me address that first. When we set boundaries, we bind ourselves in. So typically what ends up happening, and maybe that's a place where you want to start. I don't subscribe to that, but maybe that's where you want to start. When we bind ourselves in, we feel like we are in a defensive mode. And what I am subscribing is that we want to be in a situation where we feel relaxed in our life. We feel like we can authentically show up as ourselves anytime and with anyone. We are being unapologetically ourselves, and we hold ourselves to a standard knowing that we can trust ourselves more than anything. So boundaries sort of bind us in and make us feel like we have to stand behind a fence and draw a line in the sand and say, you better not cross this. Being in a relationship of that sort is always going to put the other person on defense as well. That's a consequence. Conversely, setting standards is the consequence for that, because consequences are neutral. Consequences are not good or bad. They are neutral. So a consequence of setting standards is that you don't have to think about whether or not you're going to be in a relationship with someone, because you have a set of standards that guide that. You don't even have to think about it. It's there. So having high standards, and high does not mean impossible standards. It just means a set of standards that you need for yourself. So what do we want to do about this, right? So in order to have a set of standards for yourself, what I'm going to suggest that you do is to give me a call, because setting standards is a process where we actually break down what it is that you value, what those values actually mean. It's not good enough to just have words, because they are just that. They are words. We are going to establish a mission statement for yourself, and we're going to look at what it means to be in healthy, sexually intimate relationships. And then we're going to look at where you have breached those terms in the past. So if you click the link below, you'll be able to book a free 30-minute consultation with me, where we can actually begin to talk about where and how you want to begin setting some standards for yourself. The other thing I'd like to invite you to do is to share your thoughts with me around this. I'd love to have some conversations around how boundaries and standards are working in your life. Leave your comments below, like us, tag us, share us, and subscribe to the channel so that we can get better at what we're doing, but we also can tailor the content to help you. I'm Tracey Knight, and I'm your codependency coach. And I want to remind you that today is the day that we take back, transform, and we begin to win at the game called life.